This time, we're kicking off our month of 80 schlocky sci-fi with 1984's Dune. And along the way, we ask, why does David Lynch want nothing to do with this movie? Did this go unappreciated in its time? And what's with the homoeroticism? Fear is the podcast killer on this edition of Force Fed Sci-Fi. All right, folks, welcome back to another rendition episode, bombastic, classic, from yours truly, your two favorite podcast hosts. My name is Sean Michael Culp, and along with me is my friend and co-host.
I am the mind killer, Chris Rupp.
The mind killer. I love it. Very much. I guess you could make an argument that this film is a mind killer in many ways.
I think it depends on what edition of this movie you watch, to be honest, because if you're watching the theatrical cut, yeah, you probably don't know what's going on. And then if you watch the 3-hour TV edit of this movie, you also may not know what's going on. But there's something like, I think it's a dozen different edits of this movie that exist out there in the world, and nobody knows which one is the real one to watch.
That can be a problem. This is one of those infamous films that will just, it's never, I guess it's not that it's never complete, but maybe it is. Like, we'll never see the full picture.
Yeah, and we're certainly going to dive into why that is the case today with 1984's Dune. But yeah, I just think there's so many reasons as to why we're not going to get the full film. A, David Lynch wanting nothing to do with it and not having creative control, and B, the producers just totally eviscerating what he wanted to do.
Yes. Well, yeah. Hey, well, what is this film about? I can, give us a synopsis on it.
Okay, so Dune is set 8,000 years in the future. Obviously, there's no remnants of our current world hanging around there today. But the spice, it's known as melange, is known as the most valuable item in the universe. It powers interstellar travel. It accelerates human evolution. And it's only mined on this planet called Arrakis, the biggest desert planet there ever was, apparently. And one of the ruling classes or families of this new universe, House Atreides, they're ordered by, I guess, the space emperor to go to Arrakis and mine the spice, because the spice must flow. However, this takes away the planet Arrakis from the people that were originally harvesting the spice, the Harkonnens. And once that happens, it's all like this weird plan by the Emperor and the Harkonnens to destroy House Atreides, because the Emperor is afraid of House Atreides' power, and all these rivalries and enemies emerge to destroy House Atreides, Duke Leto, his wife / non-wife, and his son. It's a complicated plot, to say the least.
Yeah, I would say complicated. Yes, that's putting it very lightly. You're absolutely right. This is like one of those movies that it's just so difficult to adapt from a book. Because I don't know if you've ever. You know how they say, like, sometimes adapting, like, a movie from the source material, it's always difficult. Like, the book is always going to be better than the film. I feel like this is one of those depictions.
I think it depends on the source material, in all honesty. And I personally have not read Frank Herbert's Dune, but to me, it sounds like one of the most dense novels out there in terms of information, because it sounds like there's backstory on literally every character conceived, and backstory on all the tribes and the major houses and all the worlds. And I mean, I think you're absolutely right. Something like this would be next to impossible to adapt for the big screen, especially if you're only given 2 hours to tell the entire story.
Right. And they tried. I mean, David Lynch wrote it and directed it, which is pretty fantastic, because a young David Lynch nonetheless, but he's a fantastic director. He's been around. He's known for his interesting artistic takes on film. So initially, there is it's an interesting setup, right? Because it's 84. It's early 80s, so it's fresh off of the Star Wars train, when back then people were trying to pump out the next big space extravaganza.
Yeah, and he actually turned down an offer to direct Return of the Jedi because he wanted George Lucas to make that movie. And he instead he was like, no, I'm going to do Dune instead.
I don't know. He did he choose wrong? That's for us to decide.
I mean, we're going to do our best to try and parse that out today. But I mean, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. Like David Lynch, I mean, was and is still an incredible filmmaker. And before this, he had made a film called Eraserhead, which apparently was the darling of all the film festivals when it came out. And he also did an adaptation of The Elephant Man, which was nominated for a whole bevy of Academy Awards and really kind of catapulted David Lynch into like auteur filmmaker status in the early 80s.
Yeah, Elephant Man. That's such a good film. I would say if you want a non-Force Fed Sci-Fi movie recommendation, check it out. It's great. It has that great scene where he's like, I am a human being. Definitely check it out.
Yeah, I'll co-sign that. I'll go a little further and say you could probably check out the entire catalog of David Lynch films, because I think he has truly made something for everybody out there. If television's more your thing, well, guess what? He's got Twin Peaks, so there you go.
Oh, right on. We were just talking about that off air. One of the dudes that's in this film, he revitalized his career with Twin Peaks. So I didn't know David. No crap. I didn't know that he made that. So that's funny. He probably felt bad after killing that dude's career.
Probably a little bit, yeah. And the dude we're talking about specifically is Kyle McLaughlin, who plays Paul Atreides in this movie. I mean, there is a thick cast list in Dune, so I think it may be best to try and breeze through this as quickly as possible. But this was I think this was Kyle McLaughlin's film debut, and I don't think it did him much credit because it didn't give him much of a chance to really show off his acting abilities. It seems like the only direct things he knew how to do was to be faster and more intense.
I definitely agree with you on that. I feel like Paul is just such a hard character to do, because I saw the new Dune, and the way that Kyle portrayed Paul is very similar. Just this kind of like stoic to himself character. He's not a very emotive guy where he's going to be, breaking grounds with his reign.
No, probably not. And then, it doesn't help that his father is played by Jürgen Prochnow, and who's, Jürgen Prochnow in this movie probably has one of the best movie beards I've ever seen.
Yes, dude, the beard game in this film, even like not even the beards only, just like the costumes are just on point. The makeup is on point. Totally agree.
I mean, and speaking of makeup, this is something that we briefly talked about on air, but Francesca Annis as Lady Jessica, and we gotta say, her eyeshadow game in this movie, definitely on point.
So on point. When she was on the screen, I'm like, man, this woman is beautiful. But hey, kudos to her for taking the role and doing her best. And I think shaving her head. I don't know if like those the females, because she played like a witch, and so she ended up having to like shave her head in the second half of the film for this weird pregnancy thing, whatever. But kudos to her if she actually did that, because that's a choice,
I mean, it could be, but production lasted like 6 months, and 6 months is a long ass time to have a bald head if you're not used to having a bald head.
Yeah, that's shaving it like every day. And their heads were shiny too. I'm like, I wonder if they waxed those things.
I mean, had to have been. There had to have been a line item in the budget for head wax. There just had to have been.
You know who we also get in this film in a very, I guess, timid, not too emotive role either, is Sean Young from Blade Runner. A young Sean Young as Chani, Paul's lover.
Yeah, like Sean Young in the early 80s definitely would have been like a big star had she had just gotten out of her own way, I think, because she did Stripes in 1981. She does Blade Runner the following year, and then she does this movie. Granted, it was a box office bomb, but still, like, it was decent. But at the same time, too, her main job in this movie is to be the love interest of Paul, and they have next to no romantic chemistry. Kyle MacLachlan and Sean Young. It is almost laughable to watch them, mac face with each other in this movie.
I totally agree. I texted him. I texted you when that happened. I'm like, dude, I can't even. I'm so dead because the scene, like, I think Kyle and her meet after Kyle, like, kills the angry man over, like, his pride, and then Sean looks at him, and then, like, some time passes, and the whole, mind you, like what Chris said with the faster, more intense, like, these people aren't very emotive in this film. So the whole time Sean sees this guy, like, Paul, nothing. There's no, like, flirting. There's no, eyeing him up like he's a snack. And then all of a sudden, in a cutaway scene, they just have her grabbing him by the arm, and they just start making out. Very confusing.
Yeah, I guess there's no version of courtship in the so distant future, I guess.
At least, like, give us a scene where you tell us how much you hate sand.
Please tell us how sand gets everywhere, and then you two start kissing.
I can't believe I would say, like, that George Lucas is, romancing the stone is a little bit more than, David Lynch. But hey, it is what it is. He had to cut the hell out of this movie.
Oh, yeah, for sure. We'll breeze through the rest of the cast list pretty quickly here. We've also got Force Fed Sci-Fi alum Richard Jordan from Logan's Run making an appearance as Duncan Idaho. We've also got the great Sir Patrick Stewart as Gurney Halleck, definitely making full use of his Royal Shakespeare Theater Company training here. We've got the legendary late great Max von Sydow as Dr. Kynes in one of his more underrated performances, I would say.
I will second that, my good sir. And then Sting. We have Sting as, I don't even know how to say it, but the Baron's younger nephew.
His name is Fade in the movie. Like, I know it's spelled F-E-Y-D, but it's pronounced like F-A-D-E.
Yes, Fade. And Sting is basically utilized to give really creepy smiles, Joker-esque smiles and stares. And to me, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't know if you'll agree, I feel he was so underutilized as a character. I was so bummed with, like, how he was just always in the side, and it wasn't until the end with that just really rushed battle. I was really I was sad about that. I don't know, how did you think?
It almost seemed like they were trying to film around Sting's, like, touring schedule or something, because, like, you're absolutely right. Fade is definitely more scary and more intimidating than the Baron is, and definitely should have been more utilized as maybe, like, the villain who's trying to hunt Paul down in the third act, or I guess now he's taken the moniker of Muad'Dib and trying to destroy spice production. But yeah, like, Fade and Sting definitely underutilized. I mean, in the villain department, not so much in the homoeroticism part.
Yeah, right. I mean, speaking of homoeroticism, the Baron, holy crap. Where is that guy? Oh, Paul Smith. No, not Paul Smith. Who played the Baron? Kenneth Mclaughlin. That dude was crazy.
Oh God, like, it's just, he's so gross to look at, and I guess that's something that's lifted from the books, right? Because, like, I mean, by our own admission, like, neither of us have read the book, so we had to breeze through, like, a Cliff Notes version or any Wikipedia links that existed. But I guess, yeah, like, the Baron, I guess, in the book is so grotesquely fat that he needs, like, that suspension suit just to, like, get around. That's why he floats all over the place.
Yeah, they allude to him as the floating fat man. And you're absolutely right. I think they're, like, draining the pus out of his boils in the opening scene where they show us who he is, and he's sick to look at, and he is a disgusting man.
Yeah, I guess that's something too that's lifted from the books but never fully explained, because I guess in the books, like, he rapes a Bene Gesserit mother, and because of this he's cursed with this disease that causes pustules to grow all over his body.
Oh, wow. Huh. Well, I guess that adds some dimension to the character.
But you'd only know that if you read the book, because it's never explained why he's having these gross things lanced and, drained during the course of the movie.
God, yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's like, how do you bring that up in the film? Have a scene where he like rapes the woman at the beginning, and then my face. Or I guess they could have like alluded to it. He could have had a throwaway line like, "Screw that woman! Look what she did to me," or something.
It's also easier to just not have that be a part of the movie.
David Lynch, I could see, because it just made his character look so, because he's such a horrible human being with the raping of that boy at the beginning and like just nonchalantly ripping out people's like heart things. I don't know, what were those things called? It was like little devices that was like a track to the heart.
They're called heart tabs. I think they're mentioned near the end of the film when Thufir has his heart tab ripped out.
And so he rips those out. The Baron does that to the boy and some people, and you just see blood come out, and it's like an instant KO.
It's definitely a sinister way of keeping your subjects in line.
Right? I'm gonna give you a heart attack unless you follow through. Horrible man. Horrible man.
All right, we'll breeze through the rest of this cast list here. We've got also TV's Linda Hunt as the Shadat Mapes. Freddie Jones is Thufir Hawat that we mentioned. Brad Dourif from Alien Resurrection makes another appearance on the Force Fed Sci-Fi podcast as Piter. Piter DeVries, I guess they call him.
Sure.
He's basically playing like a very early version of Grima Wormtongue from Lord of the Rings movies.
Indeed, but he is a hell of a character actor. I will give him his props.
We've also got Everett McGill as Stilgar, Shawnee's father. Dean Stockwell is Dr. Yue, who ends up betraying House Atreides. Sian Phillips as the Reverend Mother. I never can pronounce Irish names. I think they're spelled funny and they're pronounced even weirder. So apologies to Ireland, but you got some weird ass names over there. And then probably the one casting, at least her character drew the most laughs from you, I guess, is Aaliyah, played by Alicia Witt, Paul's little sister.
God, that child. If you want something to laugh at, Google or go on YouTube and watch Aaliyah in the 1984's Dune. It's hilarious scene. This little child wrapped in Middle Eastern garb with blue eyes going, Rah! It's fantastic.
Also creepily looking at the other characters going, wait till my brother gets here.
God, she was Chucky before Chucky was a thing.
She was that little girl from Poltergeist going, they're here.
Yeah. Come play with us forever and ever and ever. There's something about little children, that are just like, if with the right tone and look, they can just be a thing for nightmare fuel.
Come and play with us, Danny.
No, thank you. I am good.
Nope, I'm good. I'm going to ride around my big wheel in this creepy-ass hotel. I'm all good.
So that's a big cast. Very big cast.
Big cast. Too many speaking parts, in my opinion. I think there's something like 50 to 60 different speaking roles in this movie. And it's insane to me just how many people are cast in this movie. It's so hard to keep track of everybody.
So, yeah, I would say, if to get a little criticism, is if they only honed in, and I felt that was like the biggest problem, and the difference between this Dune and the new one is the new one's a lot more focused just on Paul and his mom, whereas this one, it's such an influx of characters. You're like, wait, I have to keep track of this person too? It's too much. It's way too much. Because then in my opinion, it takes away from the story. Because at one point I was like, what the hell is the point of this film?
And I think you're right, too. And I think that's something that's addressed in later on after this movie comes out, because there was actually a Sci-Fi Channel miniseries that was made for this. I think around the year 2000. It was 3 parts, so it allowed more time to develop these characters and for us to get to know them. But it's really hard to condense 50 different speaking roles into a 2-hour film, because then you run into the same problem that like some of these bloated superhero films get, where you introduce a character too late and it loses its effectiveness, or you have too many characters and inevitably somebody is going to get cut out. So I just feel this is too many people to keep track of and not enough time for us to get to know them, or at least have them feel like a part of the story.
Absolutely, because then you'll need to get a Zack Snyder treatment with the Justice League that we reviewed. And I could say that the reason, at least in my opinion, why, like we've said, too many parts, it all goes down to, in my opinion, the production and studio meddling. Because this film has been attempted, they tried to get this film off the ground for so long. I think the early 70s, correct?
Yeah, so the original novel came out in 1965, was a big worldwide success. And in 1971, producer Arthur P. Jacobs acquired the rights to it and almost made a movie that would have had David Lean directed. And if you're unfamiliar with David Lean, like, I don't know where you've been. You've obviously been living under a cinematic rock, but he made Bridge on the River Kwai, also Lawrence of Arabia, and I like it definitely would have he would have taken his eye for epic films to this movie very hard.
Oh yeah, he is the man of epic films, right? Like, Great Expectations, Oliver Twist. I mean, Lawrence Arabia. I mean, he is the man. He would have taken that.
Yeah, but then that movie doesn't get made, and then the rights go to a Wikipedia describes it as a French consortium that was led by director Alejandro Jodorowsky. He was supposed to direct this, and not gonna lie, his version of the movie sounds amazing. Like, Pink Floyd would have done the music for it. H.R. Giger would have assisted on character design. Orson Welles, he envisioned Orson Welles playing Baron Harkonnen in his version of Dune.
Ah, that would have been amazing. Orson Welles is one of my favorite actors.
However, it was scrapped because Jodorowsky's version of the movie would have ended up being like 10 to 14 hours long, and nobody was going to fund that.
No, that's that's a 4 to 5 part film. That's a long film. But it's also like, when there's so much source material, where do you begin? Because after that gentleman, who else? I think another person tried to direct this, De Laurentiis.
Yeah, Italian producer Dino De Laurentiis, I think is his name. He got the rights in 1976, and he actually went back to Frank Herbert and asked him to write a screenplay, which ended up being about 3 hours or about 180 pages in length. Because you think about a minute per page, one page equals about a minute of screen time. And in 1976, if you know your film history, that's about 3 years before a little movie called Alien comes out and totally changes the landscape of sci-fi and horror films. And Laurentiis was able to nail down Ridley Scott to direct Dune. And he got Ridley Scott for about 7 months.
Oh my God. And H.R. Giger. So this could have been before Alien.
But... it would have been after. But unfortunately, Ridley Scott's older brother unexpectedly passed away, and he didn't want to commit to like a 3-year production cycle that would have been with this movie, because he wanted to spend time with his family. And like, that was it. It seemed like it was all dead in the water from that point. And then the man we've been talking about so much, David Lynch, comes in fresh off the heels of rejecting an offer to direct Return of the Jedi, gets a chance to write and direct an adaptation of one of the most beloved sci-fi novels of all time.
So it's there, they're like, all right, maybe this is going to be the guy.
They thought so, but the screenwriting process alone took a year and a half to accomplish. And that is a long ass time to write a screenplay. Usually in 18 months, you have a film done in that time.
Oh, there's just so much source material. It's like, where do you begin, right? You got to make a trilogy.
And that's what they originally had in mind. Lynch wanted to make 2 films to split up the first book, because I guess this is a whole series of books. I think there's something like 4 or 5 books, and Lynch wanted to do basically, I think it was 2 films per book. And that was his original plan. And the producers told him, no, you have to trim this down to 1 movie, which he did, and decided to give him a production budget of $40 million.
Which back then is decent money.
That's a lot of money. Back then, I mean, in today's currency, that's over $100 million. And it's also the reason why they primarily shot in Mexico, because the exchange rate was more favorable there.
Right? All the scenes, desert scenes. Well, yeah, because the set, I believe the production required like 80 sets and 16 sound stages, 1,700 people, and 20,000 extras. Because you could see during the battle sequences, those are all people. They somehow shanghaied thousands of people to wear those black uniforms and run across the sand.
Wearing big head-to-toe black costumes in a Mexican desert. I hope to God there was water for all those people.
Yeah, well, yeah, right? Because they were, from what I read, it was a really tough production. Like, they had a lot of issues with electricity, communication, health, infrastructure issues, weather-related. I mean, it was a doom production from the beginning.
Yeah, if there's something we've learned over the course of this project is, if you have a very fraught production schedule, either you can't find a director or something happens during shooting, it's not going to bode well at the end of the day for your film.
Yeah. Oh, I will absolutely second that. Yeah. It's probably not going to start off. It's not going to finish well if it's got that rough start.
And now I think finally we can, like 28 minutes into our show, we can finally start getting into some aspects of Dune that were, I guess things that we noticed right away. And one of the big things, and this is something that we've been alluding to, is the very, I don't want to say blatant, but it is there. This film, it's at several moments is very homoerotic, I would say.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you see it. I think primarily with like the Baron, like him and his scenes, like you see a lot of allusions to homoeroticism from the way he eyes other men. I think at one scene, like Sting appears from like behind like a corridor, and he's wearing like nothing but the what would look like underwear, like a men's wrestling trunks, just like over his junk, like a banana hammock. He's covered in water, so he's glistening and basically almost naked, and Baron's eyeing him up like he wants to eat a steak.
Yeah, I actually read that Sting wanted to do that scene nude, and the studio said, no, you cannot do that. So they had to throw together that quick G-string costume for him to wear.
Yeah, I can see Sting down for it. He's a very sensual guy based on his music.
I mean, and it's definitely implied. Yeah, you're right. I mean, it's implied that the Baron is gay, but I think at this time in the mid 80s, I don't know if, having, somebody who's alluded to being gay as your villain be the smartest idea, given how this is the height of the AIDS epidemic and gay men were dying left and right, it seemed, in this across America.
Yeah, right. Especially with like then the way the Baron looked too, covered in like boils and all that. It kind of almost could be fuel for stereotypes, and more like oppression and just continuing to reinforce the issues. Gay guys are covered in diseases and STDs and STIs, and so I could definitely see that, where that would come from. And it kind of puts a sour taste in your mouth, you know?
Yeah, especially too that coupled with the fact that the Baron assaults a young man who is unable to give consent, and after he's done with him, he pulls his heart tab and kills him.
Which is messed up. I felt so nauseous after that scene. That's just how horrible, right? I think it really sets the precedent for how like terrible of a person that man is.
It's the dynamics of power that are at play throughout the course of this movie. We see Duke Leto kind of wield his power with a very even hand. Like, we don't see him power hungry in any way or exerting his will over any of his subjects or people that he's caring for. And then we see the Baron, who has paid a pretty hefty cost for his power and control of Arrakis.
Oh yeah, physically he just is. Yeah, he's definitely. It's taken a toll, and I think maybe like the difference between this film and the new one is like the newer one does a better job at like the point is almost, you could say, like white people coming in, like the white savior element, whereas with like Arrakis, since it was just a bunch of white people, it was a little bit the visual for like these high and mighty people coming in and swooping over, taking control, and like corporatism and industrialism and all that stuff going against like the third world countries. You don't see it as it's not as clear in this one.
Yeah, there's a definite theme of colonization, I think, that is present in both versions of the film, the 1984 and the 2021 version. And that's something too that like we can't really gloss over, I guess, because in many ways this movie is an allegory for oil-rich countries that now have to deal with Western interests coming in and saying, well, we want this oil. And then people looking around going like, well, but it's in our land. Like, don't we deserve to profit from it too? And Western countries going, oh, no, it's just ours now.
It is our God-given right to come in and take from your country, you peasants. Yeah, you can definitely see that in both films, that imagery. That's funny that you say that, but it's very true. Very true.
Yeah, and especially too, like in the latter half of the film, we see Paul leading the Fremen in an uprising that's similar to like what happened in Iran, in Libya, in many other Middle Eastern countries that decided, no, we don't want foreign interest here on our land, so soaking up resources that we rightfully deserve, or at least deserve a piece of. So no, we don't want you here anymore.
Absolutely. Back you demons. And he ends up leading the charge, which leads to the, I guess the destruction of that hilarious looking like palace, golden palace thing, pyramid.
Yeah, I think there's so many like filmmaking aspects to praise in this film. I think, as we were mentioning, costume design, the makeup, and some of the visual and production design are great. But some of the special effects and miniatures are just so dated and noticeable, especially by today's standards.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like while I was watching this, thinking back to, wow, the Return of the Jedi just came out the year before this film, and the Return of the Jedi is just like light years ahead for its battle sequences, space sequences, spacecraft, how they utilize just special effects. It's night and day. It really is. I don't know how you felt about that.
Oh, you're absolutely right. And how many times has this come up on the show where we watch a film set in a particular year and then we watch another film that's set in the same year and it's a night and day difference in terms of visual effects?
Right? The yeah, especially in this with those battle sequences with the guns. I don't even know what they were saying, but when they shot these blaster things, they were like, or something, or like, pew. It's almost like they mouth the word, like the sound effects, and then people would just like jump out of the way and the ground would explode. It was pretty awful.
Yeah, there's no laser blasts accompanying from those sonic weapons, and apparently they're just shooting invisible fire at the at the Baron's soldiers, and it's just killing everybody. It's basically a war of words.
Yes, yes. Once again, in some aspects, what looks great on paper, like in a book, might not translate to the silver screen.
But I think it also lends to some suspension of disbelief because this movie is set 8,000 years in the future, and it allows for a lot of freedom in terms of portraying technology. We see instantaneous interstellar travel, there's combat shields for people to use, and then there's also these sonic weapons that apparently work with in tandem with thoughts and words.
Yeah, which is pretty wild for the future, at least. The spacecraft were pretty cool too. I mean, like the suits, the hydro suits. That was all. It was all really. It's unique, right? Like the technology, the advancement is pretty unique, pretty interesting.
It is. I just would have liked to have seen more of the ship designs because I think that's one of the big departures from the book to the film is that the ship designs are wildly different compared to what Frank Herbert had originally envisioned. But again, limits of the mid 80s and technology, so you weren't going to make anything too fancy. But I like the idea of exploring the possibility of instantaneous interstellar travel. And, like, spoilers, is it technically possible? Yes, but it's very difficult to achieve. Like, you need a vast amount of energy to build a ship capable of traveling interstellarly. At least you would have to build thousands upon thousands of nuclear reactors, and just to get enough energy to do it. And the other problem is that building these thousands and thousands of nuclear reactors is very costly. There's nobody that's going to want to spend that much money just to go from one end of the universe to the other, but we don't even know if it's explorable or not.
Well, I mean, on the plus side, though, according to this author, the key to our intergalactic interstellar travel is actually in our spice cabinet. So there you go.
I would love to know what it exactly is in that spice that makes it so vital to interstellar travel.
Yeah, I agree. What is it? Is it the cayenne pepper? I don't know. I don't know. And was the planet Arrakis all spice? Were they like walking on spice?
I think so, and there's so many different uses to it too. Like it's used as a psychedelic drug, and it unlocks like I guess mental powers in humans. It changes the physiology of people too, and it's also very addictive too. Like we see those big like brain looking things at the beginning of the movie, and I guess it's because that they were too exposed. They had too much spice, and it just I don't know. Like but it's now become just one of those like fiction like drugs that are so present, in the universe that you can't avoid it, and it's now just become, I guess, ubiquitous because it's referenced to in Star Wars, and the spice must flow. The spice is everything in this universe. Apparently,
it's all about the spice. You know what else is there? I was also with this film pretty shocked about how like religion. Well, actually, no. I guess it doesn't shock me now that I think about it a little bit more. That religion has still survived thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right? Because religion's basically survived in our lifetime thousands of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's true, but I mean, but the only two religions that have really survived are the Bene Gesserit, which I don't know if it's a religion so much as like a witch coven, and there's the Spacing Guild, which I don't know. Could you is there a church of mathematics? I don't know. Like, I don't think that
no,
they didn't strike me as the church going crowd. I just think that they were super into math and interstellar travel.
That became their religion. So like science will become our religion in the future. Maybe we'll worship like Stephen Hawking's or something.
If only we worship facts instead of, our own research. But,
In the age of YouTube and TikTok, if you give a compelling argument, I will bypass any research paper, I guess. Now that's the way to go, huh?
Yeah. And it's monumental to think of like how, the three main religions that we're used to on Earth, how they managed to propagate and last throughout the centuries. And then we have global religions, or at least universal religions here 8,000 years in the future, because it seems like there's no other schools of thought in terms of like these consciousness and these belief systems.
Yeah. It seems like their religions are very practical, like math, spice, because spice powers the universe. It's more like centered on like the physicality, what's obtainable in front of them, and like how, like the voice even, doing things, taking control, as opposed to like the idea of like an afterlife and wanting to like bypass and like get to this end goal of like a heaven. It's a very different approach to religion, more grounded in the present, I would say.
So would this be more considered like a refined consciousness, or an evolved consciousness, or more of a refined system of philosophy?
I would say that's wow, that is actually a really good question. I would say, yeah, that would be, I think it's like a little mix of both, because they have some philosophical elements in there, but it is more like a consciousness, because like the witch, the more spice you get, it seemed like they're more in like present, and they're tapped into, I guess, whatever their fiber of their reality, their superpowers. They're unlocking the potential of their bodies and embracing it all, as opposed to like hoping for like a better ending or I don't know, I guess going to heaven. So I would say, yeah, it might be a little bit of a both.
Yeah, it's difficult to say without any sort of like other belief systems here in this world. I mean, we have the Bene Gesserit, who seem to be like out for themselves, and you also have the Spacing Guild that just wants the spice to flow no matter the cost. And I don't know, like we definitely see like how religion and belief systems get twisted, because then we have the Bene Gesserit mother turning on Jessica at one point of the movie, and wanting to murder her only murder Aaliyah, and really kind of chastising Jessica, like, you should have given him a daughter, that way the we could have ended the strife and all that stuff. So I don't know, to me, like, if it were an actual religion, it wouldn't be trying to have its fingers in so many pots and trying to control events. I feel like it just would have like taken a back seat and let things play out. But I don't know, it's almost more cultish as opposed to passive religion, I guess.
Like all these people, yeah, I guess you could say it's like like a bunch of kids that went to Comic-Con and discovered the power of this drug. And they all decided to go to their little decisions and beliefs, and now we're just like pining for whatever these groups are fighting for. I mean, very similar to like what we do nowadays, I guess, just less fancy uniforms and blue eyes. There is still the division of beliefs, whether it be religion or ideological, political. People still, I think, go in their little microcosms of echo chambers.
Man, everybody just seems to be living in their own echo chamber these days.
Maybe we all are, in a way. I guess that's what Meta is for on Facebook.
Yeah, until that becomes a place where people just assault other people's avatars.
That's right. Right? On Snoop Dogg's lawn, because he bought so much real estate up there. That's funny. Oh my God. So I would say like the biggest problem, talking about like assaulting a film, I would say this film, it's like divided up into like different acts. Like, it's very the first for me, the first third of it was very narrative driven. It was more like expositional, describing what's happening, what's going on, so you can get the setup. But it's like after that first third of the film, it just kind of goes wonky. Once like Paul crashes and then fights that dude, and he meets the spice people in the desert. To me, the film just like goes a little bit crazy, and I think especially at the end, you see how awful the editing is, like that where they had to make up for all the extra footage and try to salvage it. I don't know how you felt because it was just all over the place.
Yeah, this is something that we were talking about before we started recording, and both of us watched the same cut of this film that exists on YouTube. It's 3 hours long. It's a fan edit. There's clearly some 4K restoration that was attempted here, but and you're absolutely right. The first act of this film, the first hour or so, is all exposition, going into the backstory, the motives as to why the Atreides are going to Arrakis, what's the deal with the Harkonnens and the Emperor, and everything like that. The second act, the second hour or so, is where things like start to make sense. The story moves forward. Like, I actually enjoyed the second act probably the most of this film. And then the third act is clearly where the studio told David Lynch to make every single cut imaginable, because it makes next to no sense, or hopping forward in the timeline way too far. We're given the Deus Ex Machina of the water of life and how that apparently trips people out and acts as poison. And it's insane just how much of that third act really jumps around and doesn't give us a chance to relax and digest the events of what we're witnessing.
No, you're absolutely correct. It's funny, it's almost like laughably bad, because there's like a scene where they're like, all right, war. They talk about going to war, and usually like in a movie when they're about to have a big battle, epic full scale that goes over the course of a couple of years, there's like soldiers training, getting ready, going up to battle lines, but they're like, war, and then all of a sudden it's like a quick cut to them like on the freaking sand, like the desert, like shooting down ships and explosions, and it was like, what? This is you missed a little bit.
Yeah, we also get the same shot of the same a spice miner blowing up from 7 different angles.
They ran out of money.
Yeah, and also like David Lynch did not have creative control over, this final over the cut of the film. Like he was definitely hampered by what the producers wanted and what the studio wanted. And supposedly, like if we were to ever see a complete cut of Dune, it would purport to be about 4.5 hours long.
And this film was already pretty freaking long. It clocked in a little bit under 3. So I could only imagine how the 4 would be.
I mean, but the problem is that since David Lynch has disowned this movie, we have no idea to know what a definitive cut of the film is. And this is similar to what's happened with Blade Runner and all the different edits that the studio made until Ridley Scott came out with his director's cut and said, no, this one is it. This is the one I originally intended to go out to theaters. Enjoy. But since David Lynch is going to be David Lynch about this whole deal, he's not going to give us a final cut, which I feel if we were to get that, I feel like people's minds would just be blown away.
Maybe. Or maybe it's just been like so long, because I don't even know if they still have all the footage, right? Yeah, because I know he's done with this. He doesn't care about Dune anymore. So I don't think the chances of getting a Zack Snyder cut, release-esque thing isn't going to happen.
I mean, it would be nice. It would be great to see the finally the David Lynch definitive cut of Dune return. But yeah, like it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that we'll see it now. It's unfortunate though.
It is unfortunate because I feel like this movie, even though it didn't do too well and it's like critically panned, it's got a lot of progress. I think it really tells an inventive, interesting story. And like just the set pieces alone and makeup and practical effects really, I think bar none, like they're pretty impressive. And I think maybe you could give the respects to Star Wars because it really like set forth, the motion of space films being really cool and interesting, especially at this time. So I just, I feel like if it wasn't as much studio meddling, this film probably might have been more of a space epic that we hail as one of the greatest as opposed to a cult classic.
I mean, they were definitely trying to market this movie as sort of an adult Star Wars. But I think the original Dune, at least the source material, it inspired greatly a lot of what we saw in Star Wars, particularly like a galactic empire, and then also this messianic figure you have with Paul Atreides and Luke Skywalker, because the similarities between those two characters are immense and immeasurable, to say the least.
Yeah, in a way. They're there to save the galaxy, from this evil force. And I guess the spices could be utilized as the force. But I think Luke was just so much a better character. Well, because he was over 3 films as well. So we got to see him rise and fall. Whereas with Paul, there really was no he never failed. And I think maybe that's why, from a storytelling element in this movie, he's just kind of a boring character, because he's like what do they call him? A Gary Stu. He's too perfect. He has no flaws. Even a woman that shows barely any interest in him, he's able to get her. It just, and without any conflict or character flaws, there's really no growth, and it's really hard to relate to him. And I think that would be the biggest criticism with this film. The characters really aren't relatable in any regards.
No, and it also doesn't help either that Paul is born into a position of unimaginable privilege and wealth. He's the son of a prominent duke. He's had training from people like Gurney and Duncan, instruction from, at least mind instruction from his mother, and also the guiding influence of his father. And it's anybody would be lucky to have just one of those people, that type of person in their lives, to mentor them and guide them. And Paul has 4 of them.
Yeah. So he is set up for success. For sure. And I think, it's just I don't know, what did you think, Paul, how did he do, as a leader? Do you think he got cocky, or he was just, because especially, I don't know, just at the end, it's he became, initially when he met the people, and that one dude was like, "You have to fight me," and Paul's like, "No, I don't want to fight." At the end, he turned the inverse, where he just starts ordering around the royal family, and he's like, "I will kill you," Sting's character, and it was just a big switch. He kind of lost his humanity.
It's the whole Gary Stu thing. Him drinking the water of life made him all powerful, and he could do no wrong. So of course he's gonna ride to Arrakeen right on top of a sandworm and totally mess stuff up, and of course have the a very anticlimactic final night fight with Fade, and basically tell poor Princess Arulin that, hey, you're gonna marry me, but I'm still gonna sleep with my boo over here. And and to be honest, and since this is the only film we get, we kind of have to infer as to how Paul's time with the Fremen is gonna go. And this is a ton of power that this young man now finds himself in. He's basically the de facto ruler of Arrakis, the de facto emperor of the galaxy now. He's now in charge or oversees the production of the most valuable thing in the universe. That type of power is going to go to anybody's head. I don't care what sort of, religious superpower he has. This is absolute power, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
I totally agree with you, man. I don't think anyone has ever been able to rule and be successful without having some power go to their head. And I don't see Paul staying, I don't see him being this Messiah-like creature for too long. I think it'll just go to his head. And then, or he'll get murdered.
You never know. But it's just so frustrating, to see Paul kind of go through no real challenges, if you think about it. I mean, yes, there is the issue of him being kidnapped and him and his mother nearly being dropped in the desert, but they're able to escape that. He's able to, survive his duel with the Fremen, train the Fremen to overthrow the Harkonnens and the Emperor. It all seems like it's second nature to him. Nothing really feels like a challenge to Paul at any point in this movie.
And and even the imagery of him riding the worm, like taming this giant beast of a creature that has just caused so much wreckage and murdered so many people on this planet. Paul like stabs it a little bit or opens one of its flaps or something, and then he just climbs right up, puts a rope around it, and he just tamed the bull like just like that. And it's really, to me, that's kind of when I started, like when I checked out of the film and just started laughing at the schlockiness, because I'm like, all right, this man he's too perfect. Like how can you just tame this giant beast? But I guess, it's supposed to be the representation of his power and all that. And I understand that, but it's just from a believable sense. I guess that's where, like, for me, with some sci-fi films, they just go a little bit too much, and it's just so unbelievable where you're just like, I don't buy it. But, it is what it is. Potato, potato. Some people love that stuff.
Yeah, and, for the most part, I will admit, I was initially skeptical when we wanted to include this in 80s schlock sci-fi. It was like, I was thinking, how schlocky is this movie? And then third act, it steered into the skid of schlockiness. It went full on. It went there, and I was like, oh, there it is.
Yeah.
When Paul's writing the word, I'm like, oh, this is the territory we're going into. Okay.
And, I was thinking the same as you, and then sure enough, those explosions, man, that montage of that battle was just, it was so bad. So bad. The Baron flying into the mouth of the worm.
Oh, geez. Yeah, and you're absolutely right about the explosions. I have a feeling Michael Bay watched this movie as a child and thought, I want to make a movie that's just that.
Explosions. Someone has to, and I don't know if it's on YouTube already, but they have to, like, edit together all the explosions in a Michael Bay film. I would love to see that.
Oh, there's gotta be. Like, I don't think the man's ever made a movie without explosions.
Right? Even his ambulance film that's coming out. I was watching the trailer. I'm like, this seems a little too tame for Michael Bay. And then sure enough, all these explosions. And I'm like, there it is. There's the man that I knew. Just to digress.
I mean, there is, like, the first thing you type in, there is a top 10 Michael Bay explosions. There's also a Robot Chicken sketch that just says Michael Bay presents explosions.
I love it. God, I love YouTube so much. Well, I guess, we could say in this episode, who's not doing their job as the editors, but who would you say in the movie contextual, in the movie concept, who isn't doing their job as a character?
And I think that, like, and this is the point, I chose this character because this is the point in the film where it transitions. Like, we just finished the second act that was actually really good, made the film watchable and entertaining. But I would say the person not doing their job in this movie is Jamis, the Fremen warrior who, not 30 seconds after Paul and his mother winding up in the siege, where Jamis is just like, I challenge you to a duel, and Jamis is dead.
Yes. I'm going to totally back you on that. That's actually mine as well. And that was my criticism of the modern film, the one that just got released too. Because it just doesn't make sense that, like, this dude shows up and that's like the first decision that we're going to make. We're going to challenge you to a duel. It's like, wait, what? Don't you want to, like, know? But maybe that's like their culture, just like us. We kill what we don't understand.
I just wanted Paul to look at Jamis and just be like, you don't even know me.
I will end you. And he does.
Yeah, well, yeah. It doesn't end so well for Jamis because he's then turned into water for everybody to drink.
Yeah, oh my God, I know.
That's so morbid to think. Like, if you die in this world, especially if you're among the Fremen, your body's turned into something drinkable.
Oh my God, I know. It's so crazy to think about that. Like, all right, kids, grandma just passed away drinking grandma. I wonder if they like bottle up different people's bodies, you know? They have a cabinet full of their lineage and their generations of their family. That's
Here's grandma, age 83 years. And then we have your Uncle Stephen, who unfortunately passed away young. He was age 28 years.
We're going to keep that on the shelf for a little bit. Excellent.
Oh, God, that's horrible, but so funny.
That is so funny. It is so horrible. I mean, it's kind of cool because, like, in some regards, I know, and like some monks, they do that practice, like with Buddhism, where like a monk will pass away. And so what they'll do is they'll use like their body parts as like tools, like they'll turn their bones into like forks and knives, or like their skull. They'll like drink soup or tea out of their skull, obviously after washing it and cleaning it. But like the semblance is like, you know, you give back death and permanence and all that stuff. And like that's something that's really powerful. Not for everyone, but I understand that, but I don't know if the movie was going for that.
Yeah, I don't think so either. Like, I think it was just like, you know, them utilizing everything at their disposal just to survive. Like, oh, there's a dead body here. Well, we can't just bury it. We have to use it for something.
Turn them into water. I love it. I wonder what that technology is. That's just mind-boggling. Oh, my God. So that's cool. Did you have any lens flares or anything?
Yeah, this is something that we've actually previously dunked on a little bit here on our episode today, but those weirding modules, the sonic weapons, the thought weapons, whatever they're called, they're completely ridiculous when they're being used in this film, both during Paul's training and the battle sequences. It is just something that is completely ludicrous to look at, because they say a word, and then 100 feet away, there's an explosion. There's no laser blast. There's nothing. It's just like, I send bad word, and the bad word turns into explosion.
Yeah. I'm going to agree with you as well. Those were just so stupid. They're so silly.
It's like weaponized Twitter is what it is.
Yeah, weaponized Twitter. I like that. It was just so silly, so outlandish. It's just one of those things where I think, once again, where the book, it just does not translate because it's just so out of this world, unimaginable. That's funny. If for red shirts, I don't know about you, but mine is kind of, I guess, torn between, I understand in like a contextual character why they want to have the Duncan fight that guy so that he gets his first taste of blood and like changes. But I would say Duncan's death was my red shirt, because he just like got brutally murdered. I think he got stabbed through like the face or something, or in the heart, like on the stairway, right? And then you get Paul just go, no.
Well, there's that training sequence earlier in the film with Gurney and Paul where they say like the slow blade penetrates the shield, and I think that was just like, I think one of the soldiers shot like a slow moving, like it looked like a drill bit, to be honest, and it went through the shield and it got Duncan right in the head and killed him instantly. But like, yeah, I can see that, because Duncan, you know, isn't a huge part of this film. I mean, I think he's maybe in 3 scenes, including his death. And then, like, that's it.
That's all we get. Yeah. As opposed to, like, the new film where we get him a little bit longer. Yeah, it's just funny. How about you?
You know, I think this is something that you know, and past listeners of our shows will know. If I see an animal in a movie that's somehow mysteriously killed, I'm going to pick said animal. And if you notice, when the Atreides are leaving Caladan, their home planet, they have a little pug with them, and they carry this pug with them to Arrakis to be part of their new home and their new world. And about, I would say, at the coup attempt, when the Harkonnens and the Emperor's soldiers show up, this pug disappears. It is not seen again throughout the rest of the film. And given the Harkonnens' just immense dislike of anything Atreides, I have to believe that they took this pug and brutally killed it. And so I have to pick that cute little doggo as my red shirt in this movie.
I think the dog died in battle because during the coup, and I don't know, you might have missed it, but Gurney, Patrick Stewart's character, he had the pug, and you can rewatch it. He stuffed the pug in his suit, and he was like, "Charge!" So Patrick Stewart is running with the knife, and he's holding the pug in his shirt.
Yeah, and then the pug is gone when we see Gurney again.
Why did he bring the pug? That was my question. Why would you bring this poor happy pug with you to battle?
I have to hope that pug at least took a laser blast for Gurney and died heroically. If he was going to bring a poor defenseless dog into battle with him, I hope to God that the pug died saving Gurney's life.
Right. What the hell? Why Gurney? Why? Oh, God, I know. That's funny. Yeah, I couldn't believe it either when I saw that. I'm like, what the hell, man? Poor pug.
Well, that was what bothered us. Do you want to hear what bothered the internet, Sean?
Of course. You know I always do.
So in this latest edition of This Week in Toxic Fandom, when Stilgar marks the Feydekin with red paint or blood, he says there are 15 of them. Right before Paul takes the Water of Life freeze frame, and you will see 16 of them. So we're off by one in the Feydekin. The elite soldiers, apparently, out of thousands of Fremen, you freeze frame and you see, oh, look, there's 16. There's not 15.
That's funny. So they are the best soldiers, but they suck at math. Or maybe the director and the writers, they suck at math too.
Or maybe an extra just saw like, hey, I want some red paint on my shoulder too. Like, I'll take some. And then David Lynch was just like, well, I thought it's like, whatever. Just leave it in the movie. They're going to change this anyway.
Yeah, right. Yeah, they'll probably edit this out. Crap, we ran out of uniforms. Just wear this. It'll be fine. That is funny. Oh, God. Well, hey, so we have I feel like that is a good gripe to have because they did make a note of 15. And that is a studio blunder. So I understand their anger.
Yeah, pro tip, just don't say anything specific numbers-wise in your film because there's going to be someone out there on the internet that's going to count whatever you say and then go to IMDb and complain about it.
Absolutely. I mean, there are people out there that actually like freeze frame on like newspapers and stuff in movies, and they'll actually like try to read it. And then if like the newspaper doesn't actually say anything coherent, they'll post online. There'll be a gripe about the film.
Of course they will, because people have too much time on their hands these days.
Absolutely. Much like us for watching this movie. But we can get into the legacy of this film. I guess, as we've discussed, with the tough start to get off the ground, it really did not make any money, like enough money for the box office.
No, in 1984 money, like this movie, to turn a profit, would have had to have made $200 million. And you want to take a guess as to how much this made at the box office that year?
How much? Like 20, 25?
A little better than that. It only grossed $31 million.
Jeez.
There were a lot of things that contributed to that, though. As we said, the production budget was $40 million, which at the time, that was actually very expensive for a film. Like, even the Star Wars films didn't get a $40 million budget. And people hated the movie. And I think what contributed to a lot of the negative press about it was not screened ahead of time for critics to review it. So once the movie came out, you're seeing a lot of bad reviews. Roger Ebert gave it 1 star, called it the worst movie of 1984, and so much bad press really kind of leads to low box office numbers.
I get that. Well, yeah, right? Because that's when you know a film's going to be bad if they don't allow the critics to view it before the general public.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's tells audiences like, why aren't they letting critics see this? Maybe we shouldn't go see it. Like it's very simple math here. It's there's no benefit to be had by not screening it for critics. Even if your movie's bad, we'll let people find out about it after the movie comes out and you've already gotten their money.
Makes sense. Makes sense. I mean, the movie is just so bloated too. So it's like all the details that you have to like keep track of. Didn't they have like I thought I read somewhere they had like a guide?
Yeah, I read this online that some theaters actually created or had a guidebook for audience members to take as they were going into the theater. You know, that had a list of definitions of words in the movie, descriptions of the planets, and also a character list as well. So that's also kind of takes people out of the experience when you have to, you know, constantly look through a book and saying like, oh, here's who Thufir is, and here's what spice is, and oh, that's right, we're on planet Arrakis.
That is, yeah, that's no. No, 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 no. That I wonder though how much that would fetch nowadays on eBay. Because that is, you know, that would be a movie item. You know,
I'm looking at one. I'm looking at one right now that's actually, it's from a Japanese theater, and apparently, it is 32 pages. It's unread. And
oh my god!
You can get one. I'm looking at it's $22 on eBay right now.
Oh my god! 32 pages though.
Yeah,
that's insane.
32 pages.
No. That's like a short novel. What? I'm about to watch a movie. I don't have time to read.
I mean, if one of our listeners is feeling generous and wants to get us a couple of copies of this, we will be eternally grateful to you.
Bet. Absolutely. Send us an email and we'll tell you where to send it. Did they have any sequels or anything?
Well, because this movie tanked at the box office, any and all plans for sequels were immediately canceled. David Lynch was released from his contract, and he was actually in the middle of working on the screenplay for the sequel that was going to be titled Dune Messiah. And then, like, they were all like, nope, no more. You're done. Bye-bye.
You didn't give us what we wanted, which was money. Adios, you crazy man.
I mean, but people have not faulted David Lynch for how this movie turned out. I mean, Frank Herbert was even complimentary of David Lynch's efforts, and the former, or I guess, director with an unproduced vision, Alejandro Jodorowsky, he complimented Lynch, but said the movie was terrible, but owed the fact that that was probably due to the producers cutting it up and not Lynch's efforts.
Yeah, I think, you know, he's spot on. And I think, didn't the film, it did get nominated for an Academy Award, right? For Best Sound?
Best Sound, I mean, but also in that same year, I think it was nominated for a Stinker Award for Worst Movie, so.
So it's like, yeah, this movie still sucks. But elements are okay. Which, I don't know. I was going to actually talk to you about that. So the soundtrack of this film is Toto. You know, the band Toto from the 80s and maybe 70s. I wasn't really, like, moved by the soundtrack. It didn't really, like, do anything special, you know? It's not like Hans Zimmer.
No, there was this weird, like in probably in the first 2 hours of the movie, there's heavy orchestral score, some electronic synthesizer, and then in that final act, you know, when we have the Resistance movement, that's where the Toto soundtrack comes in. You hear a lot of rock and roll, more synthesizers, and I feel like the soundtrack should have been a bit more consistent. You pick one thing or you pick the other, and the inclusion of Toto in this movie was probably not warranted, to say the least.
No, it added to the schlockiness because it was just so out of the ordinary. Like, it just didn't make sense for the film. The film didn't seem like, it almost felt like a 70s film to me. But then once that final third act, I was like, oh, this is so 80s schlock. Because you have the weird synthesizer rock with like the montage. It just, that's where it was.
I mean, but Toto, like, they came out with the song Africa. If you've ever been to a karaoke night, you've heard somebody sing this song. That came out in 1982. right in the middle of, probably, right as production was kicking off for this movie. So the studio was probably like, hey, we can capitalize on this. We can have Toto do the soundtrack.
That'll help. Please come see our film. It's not as bad as it sounds. Well, yeah, it was. I mean, David Lynch still doesn't care for it. Won't talk about it. I know there's like kind of a cult following with this. Like, it's weird because older people that I've asked about it the past couple weeks, they all review it like they remember it fondly. They're like, oh, yeah, this is great. I remember Dune in the 80s. And I don't know if that's just like hindsight. We tend to view it with rose-tinted glasses, because, I can't really, it didn't gross that much. And the VHS, so I don't think I think if people say they remember it fondly, I don't know. I mean, there is a sect of people out there that really do enjoy this, but it's hard for me to believe that most people enjoy this.
I think at least the 1984 version is something that's riding on the coattails of future adaptations. Because, like I mentioned, it's got a miniseries remake in the year 2000 that was well received, that won a couple of Emmys. And then we had the Denis Villeneuve remake that came out in 2021 to massive critical acclaim and box office success, and really helped to redeem the legacy that is this movie. But I think you're right. I think people who do remember this movie may not exactly remember how bad it is, but they remember everything that came afterwards that was positive, and that has sort of clouded their perception of this movie to some degree.
Mm-hmm. I'll agree. Because we've said, we only saw the fan one because it was free, number one. And number two, it added extra stuff. Because I know prior to, they said, the worst part about this film was that it was short and it didn't make sense. So watching a longer version felt like the better idea. But even the longer version just didn't work. So I don't know. Well, yeah, I think, it's had some legacy, some things. Didn't they make games and stuff from this?
Yeah, I mean, this got the full, product blitz that contributed to the marketing budget. It got toys, it got games, it got books, it got comic books, it got everything under the sun that could be considered a tie-in release for this movie. And you hadn't even sold one ticket, and you're already committed probably close to $100 million in just the marketing and merchandise alone. And of course you weren't going to make any money because nobody knew what to expect from it. I mean, if you look at Star Wars had the toys come out after the movie had come out, and it made, all the money in the world. And to commit to this massive merchandise budget, of course, is going to sink any hopes of turning a profit.
Right. Well, at least now they can with the new one. So I guess that is, a pro from it, right? Which, I don't know, maybe I'll rewatch the new one now again with a little bit different view because that I've seen the old one. But I don't know. We'll see. Do you want to get into ratings for this?
Oh, hell yes. Let's get into it, shall we?
Perfect.
All right, I'll lead us off. So using our unique scale in the Force Fed Sci-Fi podcast of wouldn't watch, would watch, would own, and would host a viewing party. I mean, I tried to come into Dune, with a clear mind, but after watching it, at least watching a fan edit that does include the original theatrical cut, deleted scenes, and all that, there's just so much to digest in this movie. There's the history, the interpersonal dynamics, they all come to a head, but there's massive technological limits of the mid-'80s, and it's honestly laughable when somebody like Patrick Stewart has to put on these box shields and looks more like a character from Minecraft than somebody who's instructing Paul in combat. But it's the 80s. And so, we've come to expect that with some, films from the older generations. However, I think it's a visual marvel for the time, but I think waiting 10 years to make this movie would have made a world of difference in terms of the look of it, and the leaps and bounds that were made in visual effects at the time would have made a massive difference. I think you still could have had David Lynch make this movie, but maybe studios would have been a bit kinder to him and allowed him the creative control he sought. Still don't think I would watch a 4.5-hour version of this movie, but again, I don't know which version to watch because nobody has come out and said this is the right version to watch and the one that makes the most sense. So, I mean, with all that in mind, I'm calling this a would not watch.
Fair enough.
How about you, Sean? What do you give to Dune?
Sure. For to kick off our schlocky film review project, I would also give Dune a would not watch. Seeing the new one and then seeing this one, it's very interesting to compare and contrast the two. I would say, like, storytelling, like I said, the first third for me of this film was great. Narrative driven, interesting, great makeup, great props, great director choices. And I think for the first third of this film, while there is weird things like the woman and the girl at the beginning monologuing and trying to explain everything to us, they spent a little less time than the new one with just meandering things like sitting and sipping over coffee. They really got into the narrative of the story, which is what I appreciate from a lot of older films. But this film just really falls apart the second half, and it's so schlocky, just tough to follow. So for me, I just couldn't. It was funny. I went from enjoyment to utter confusion to just giving up and laughing at the silly wackiness of how it all turns out. So I don't mind it, but it still isn't something that I would recommend. Upon watching this, I reflect on the newer one. I say, the newer one isn't as bad as initially compared to this one. So maybe I'll watch it again if I can, get over the length of the scenes. But yeah, not too bad. It was fun. It was a good first round for our 80s schlocky sci-fi, and I'm excited to check out the next one.
Yeah, I am as well. And you got to pick Dune, so we're going next with my pick, and I'm going to a bit of the more lighthearted side, I guess, of 1980s sci-fi. I'm picking a film from probably the master. If the 1980s were a genre, I think John Hughes would capitalize on that, and I'm going with Weird Science as our pick for next time.
Sweet. I'm down. I've never seen it, but I've heard of them and John Hughes too. So, bet, my man, I am excited.
Me too. That's going to be a fun one to watch.
All right. Well, as always, Chris, I appreciate you, my good sir. Until next time.
It is a pleasure, as always, Sean, to record with you and to really break down schlocky films and all sci-fi films in between. And if you all enjoyed this episode of the Force Fed Sci-Fi podcast, please head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a 5-star review. You can also now leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. That really helps to drive us up the charts as well as help people like you find the show. We are across the spectrum of social media with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, all at Force Fed Sci-Fi. You can check out and download episodes from Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you stream your audio. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. Finally, you can check out our website, forcefedsci-fi.com, for show notes and links to all of the social media. And so for all of us at the Force Fed Sci-Fi team, we will see you next time.